You ever stand in a room full of people who know your name and realize none of them actually know you? I did. It was the company holiday party. Cheap uplights making the walls look expensive. A DJ who kept mispronouncing our department names. A rented ballroom that smelled like citrus cleaner and confidence. I wasn't going to go. My wife said it would be good optics. So I ironed a shirt I didn't care about and practiced the expression you wear when your boss tells the same joke for the fourth time. I didn't walk in expecting a scene. I walked in expecting to make it through dessert without becoming part of anyone's story. Early on, it felt harmless. Sales guys holding court near the bar, HR policing the raffle tickets like contraband, my team clustered around a high-top trading small talk and paper napkins. My boss, let's call him Whitman, arrived late and loud, a whiskey already in his hand, tie loosened like a personality. He's the kind of man who points with his glass. I've worked for him 4 years, long enough to learn the geometry of his moods, long enough to know when to get small. I'm the quiet one on my team. Operations, client delivery, the boring parts that keep billing from catching fire. I don't sparkle on stage. I make sure the lights turn on. That night, I'd planned to stay near the edges, say the right congratulations, and leave with my dignity folded neatly in the inside pocket of my coat. The speeches started after entrees. The CFO thanked our incredible people. The chairman misread 2 names and made a joke about getting old. Mild laughter. Then Whitman was invited up. I felt my shoulders rise without meaning to. He's good with rooms. He just can't stand not being the loudest thing in them. He began with a story about landing a monster client. Pantomimed emails like he was juggling grenades. Everyone laughed. He winked at the COO, then he decided to improvise. And of course, he said, none of this happens without the folks who, eventually show up. He turned his head to where my team stood. Isn't that right, Mark? My name isn't Mark, it's Ethan. That was the first small cut. People chuckled like it was a bit. I felt heat rise under my collar and willed it to cool. He kept going. We've got geniuses who can build a dashboard in their sleep, he said. And then we've got Ethan, our very own brake pedal. He held his hands up like he was stopping a train. Always the cautious email. Always the let's slow down and double check. You'd think we hired him from the DMV? In the second row, someone laughed too loudly. It's always the ones who need the boss to see them laugh. I stared at the tablecloth. It had a pattern of tiny squares that didn't quite line up. The misprint started to make me dizzy. He wasn't done. Now don't get me wrong, Whitman said, faux magnanimous. We need a brake pedal. Otherwise we crash, right? He looked back at me with a grin. But next year, Ethan, how about you try being a gas pedal, just once? For me? He blew a kiss into the microphone. The room did that thing rooms do. Some people smiled at me like they were apologizing with their eyes. Some looked down, and some looked delighted to be near the joke, but not inside it. I could have raised a glass and made it easier. I could have performed gratitude for the chance to be diminished, and called that maturity. Instead, I swallowed, nodded once to no one in particular, and kept my hands on the edge of the high top so they wouldn't shake. I thought about the email I wrote 2 weeks earlier that kept a salesperson from promising an impossible timeline. I thought about the Saturday I spent at the office fixing a bad import so Monday wouldn't be a funeral. Brake pedal. The room waited for my smile. I didn't give it to them. Whitman moved on to real stars, his words, and I faded into the wallpaper. I heard my name mispronounced again, this time by a VP who congratulated me for a project I didn't lead. I corrected him quietly. He frowned like accuracy was a social problem. I tried to be a good sport. I really did. I clapped at the right moments, laughed twice at nothing in particular, and kept my drink count at 1 because I know the difference between fuel and gasoline. Every time Whitman circled our side of the room, a ripple of attention followed him like wake on a lake. When he stopped with us, my teammates straightened their shoulders. He draped an arm over my colleague's chair and told a story about pushing through blockers. He didn't look at me when he said blockers. He didn't need to. There was a photo station near the stage. People posed with props. Plastic crowns, fake mustaches on sticks. Whitman grabbed a crown, set it at a cockeyed angle on his head, and insisted our table get a group shot. I tried to position myself on the edge. He pulled me into the middle with 2 fingers at my elbow. Group effort, he said for the camera. And then just before the flash, he leaned in and whispered, "Try not to blink slowly, DMV." The flash went off. It caught me mid-exhale. I walked to the restroom to wash my hands and found my face in the mirror, looking like it belonged to someone polite. The sink had one of those automatic faucets that only works if you beg it. I stood there, palms under the sensor, thinking about how many tiny things we tolerate every day and call that being an adult. When I came back, dessert had arrived. Whitman had a second whiskey. A song from college swelled and loosened the room. He tapped his glass again. He had one more bit, apparently. "And a special shout-out to Ethan," he said, bright with alcohol and appetite. "The man, the myth, the backlog." Laughter. "We tease because we love," he added, and made the kind of face that absolves the speaker and indicts the target for not enjoying it. My team looked at me. They weren't cruel. They were just attached to their paychecks. I nodded once to let them off the hook. I checked my watch and did the math. If I left then, I could be home before my wife fell asleep on the couch. I pulled my coat from the back of a chair and slipped out, through a side door into air that tasted like cold metal. The parking lot glowed sodium orange. I stood under it alone and listened to music bleed through the ballroom wall, thudding like a heart I wasn't going to rescue. My phone buzzed. My wife. "How is it?" I typed. "No casualties." I didn't send it. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stared at the little line of trees they'd planted around the lot to make it feel less like a lot. A breeze moved them in sync like they'd been coached to agree. A pair of coworkers came out to smoke. They saw me, hesitated, then decided to pretend they hadn't. I don't blame them. Proximity is dangerous when someone else is the joke. The door shut behind them and let out another burst of music, then closed with a soft finality that sounded like a stamp. I thought about going back in and doing the ritual. Shake hands. Thank hosts. Say great night, with the cadence of truth. I could have stayed on brand and made it simple for everyone to forget. Instead, I stood there feeling something quiet click into place. Not anger, not humiliation, something colder. The part of you that chooses which bridges you're willing to die defending and which ones you're willing to watch burn from a safe distance. I texted my wife, "Heading home soon." Then I put the phone away and walked along the edge of the lot until the music became a low, harmless hum. Somewhere behind me, Whitman was still holding court, certain his words evaporated when the laughter did. I tucked my hands into my pockets and kept walking. A man passing through a light he didn't need any more. Monday mornings in our office always smelled like burnt coffee and panic, masked as productivity. By 8:45, the floor hummed again. The same rows of screens, the same predictable chatter about traffic, weekend errands, and streaming shows. You'd never know a grown man had been publicly dismantled 3 nights ago between the second course and dessert. That's the thing about corporate life. Humiliation doesn't echo. It just blends. I walked in with a paper cup and a clean shirt. No one met my eyes right away. People get allergic to awkwardness when it's not theirs. My teammate Sarah, usually the first to say good morning, suddenly found the copy machine fascinating. I didn't mind. I didn't need a witness. I needed the silence. Whitman's door was half open. He was on a call, laughing, that same performative tone, the sound of someone who thinks volume is leadership. He spotted me through the glass and raised his cup in a lazy salute. "The universal sign for we're fine." I raised mine back. "The universal sign for sure we are." I sat down, opened my inbox, and watched the first wave of Monday arrive. A meeting invite from HR, a client escalation, 2 quick favors. Nothing new. What was new was how quiet it felt inside my head. Normally, after a night like that, I'd replay the scene, edit my reactions, write the comeback I didn't say, but not this time. Something had gone still, the kind of stillness that comes when a storm finally makes up its mind. Around 10, Whitman came out of his office. "Morning, superstar," he said loud enough for the cubicles to hear. His grin was toothpaste bright. "Recovered from the festivities?" I looked up from my monitor steady. "Yeah. You?" He smirked. "Barely. Next time I'll make sure to give you a trophy for most serious man in the room." A few people chuckled softly, more out of habit than humor. I smiled once, polite and surgical. "Next time, I'll make sure to earn it." He blinked, not expecting that tone. Then he shrugged, patted my shoulder, his version of grace, and walked off toward the break room, already whistling. The man could burn a house down and compliment the paint job. I turned back to my screen and opened a folder most people didn't know existed. Internal project architecture, server logs, client data flows. My domain, my responsibility. And for the first time, I realized how fragile the company really was. Everything that kept the lights on passed through my hands at some point. Not a threat, just a fact. By lunch, the awkwardness had dissolved into routine. People only remember drama if it affects payroll. I ate at my desk, sandwich in one hand, mouse in the other. My inbox pinged. An email from Whitman. Subject, Friday night. Body. I was just joking, right? All in good fun. Appreciate your hard work, as always." No apology, no acknowledgement, just PR with a smile. I wrote a reply, short, of course, all good. Then I deleted it, closed the email, and started something else instead. A backup. Local, encrypted, mirrored to an external drive I kept for personal archives. Entirely within policy. Entirely invisible. By 2 p.m., I had 2 gigabytes of insurance. Not leverage, preservation. If they ever decided to make me the punchline again, I wanted my exit clean, not desperate. The day dragged on in meetings about deadlines that didn't matter. Every so often, Whitman would find a reason to mention team spirit or transparency. The words hit my ears like static. I nodded when expected, spoke when necessary, and kept my breathing even. At 5, people packed up. Sarah finally broke the silence near my desk. "Hey," she said quietly. "About Friday?" I stopped her with a small shake of my head. "Don't," I said softly. "It's fine." She hesitated, then nodded, relieved and guilty all at once. "Okay, you didn't deserve that." "Maybe not," I said, shutting my laptop. "But I learned from it." That night at home, I opened a beer, sat at the kitchen table, and wrote down everything that had happened. Not for revenge, for clarity. I wrote the words, "I work for a man who confuses cruelty with charisma." Then I drew a line under it and stared until the letters blurred. Tuesday I showed up early. The janitor was still mopping. I unlocked my workstation, finished the last of the data exports, and uploaded one final document to a personal cloud folder. The workflow I'd built from scratch, the one that kept their biggest client happy. I didn't alter it. I just took a copy. My version was cleaner anyway. By noon, Whitman called an impromptu stand-up. He wanted everyone to reset the energy after the holidays. Corporate theater. He went around the circle, asking each person what their goals were for the new quarter. When it was my turn, I said, "Consistency." He grinned. Mr. Reliable." I smiled back. "For now." Nobody caught it. Nobody ever does when you speak in calm tones. Back at my desk, I opened a blank email. The subject line was simple. Notice. The body had one sentence. "Effective tomorrow, I resign." I didn't hit send yet. I saved it as a draft and stared at it until the cursor stopped blinking like it was trying to warn me. The thing about leaving isn't the moment you decide. It's the quiet between decision and action. The space where you finally understand what peace might sound like. That evening, Whitman stopped by my desk on his way out. "You're on for the client presentation next week, right?" he said, slipping his coat on. I nodded. "Don't worry, I'll deliver." He grinned. That's what I like about you, Ethan. Always dependable. I waited until he left before whispering, "Not for long." On the drive home, the radio played something upbeat. I didn't turn it off, I just listened, watching the city blur past, thinking about how some endings don't explode, they evaporate. By the time I parked, the draft email was still sitting unsent in my mind, but it was there, waiting, like a loaded chamber that only needed one quiet click. And that decision, the one I thought was just for my sanity, I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. I woke up before dawn the next day, no alarm. My body already knew this wasn't a normal morning. The world outside was still half dark, that blue-gray kind of silence before people start pretending to be busy. I made coffee, black, no sugar, no milk, clean. I watched the first curl of steam rise and thought about how simple things look right before they boil. At 6:58, I opened my laptop. The draft email blinked at me, still patient, still waiting. I read it once more, just one line, polite, unemotional. Effective immediately, I resign. No details, no explanations, just truth stripped down to its bones. At 7:02, I hit send. Then I closed the laptop, unplugged it, and slid it into my bag. The sound it made against the zipper was quiet, final, like the click of a door you won't open again. I stood for a minute in my kitchen, feeling the silence shift. You'd think there'd be adrenaline or guilt. There wasn't. Just clarity. Like someone had turned down the noise that had been running under everything for years. I drove to the office one last time. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to see it. The building where I'd built entire systems and learned to shrink small enough to survive meetings with a man who thought volume was vision. The parking lot was still empty when I pulled in. I left my ID card on the passenger seat, engine idling. For a second I thought about going inside, telling someone, making it official. Then I remembered how Whitman said, "You're part of the family," before cutting our bonuses last year. I turned the key, shut off the engine, and walked away. I didn't quit in anger. I just stopped participating. By 9 a.m., my phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter. Call after call. Unknown number. Then the office line. Then Whitman. I let them ring. I knew what he was realizing. See, the project we were working on, the one he bragged about at every board meeting, ran on a network of processes I'd built. I was the only one who knew how each part talked to the next, not by design, by necessity. You don't build stability in chaos unless you understand its language. By noon, the messages shifted from curious to frantic. "Ethan, where did you save the final release files? We can't locate the staging credentials. Call me ASAP." I didn't. I was sitting by the window, sunlight cutting the floor into clean geometry, watching the dust move like lazy confetti. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I had everything, neatly archived, legally mine. Documentation, templates, process flow, the whole skeleton of their success. Without it, the system stalled. Clients called. Deliverables delayed. Whitman's charm doesn't fix downtime. By the next day, I had a new number, a new email, and a quiet plan. I reached out to 3 people I respected, not friends, not colleagues, the kind who listen before they speak. One of them connected me to a competitor, smaller company, better ethics, hungrier leadership. We met that week in a cafe that smelled like espresso and potential. The CEO was maybe 10 years older than me. He didn't waste time with, "Tell me about yourself." He just said, "I've heard you're the one who built the backbone of Whitman's operation." I nodded. "Was." He smiled. "Interested in building one that doesn't depend on people like him?" I took a sip of coffee. "I already have half of it in my head." He extended a hand. "Then you start Monday." While my new world was taking shape, the old one was burning quietly. Sarah texted from her personal number 3 days later. "Whitman's losing it. Server's down. He's blaming everyone. You okay?" I replied, "Better than okay. Stay clear of the fallout." She sent one more message. He said, Ethan will crawl back when he realizes no one else will hire him. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Men like Whitman only understand loyalty when it's convenient. I didn't crawl. I built. My new office was smaller, but the air felt lighter. My ideas didn't echo into voids. They landed, grew. I rebuilt my systems, cleaner this time. No blind spots, no single point of failure, not even me. Meanwhile, Whitman tried to recover. He hired consultants to patch what he didn't understand. They charged triple and fixed nothing. Clients started asking questions. The board started listening. And then the whisper began. Quiet at first, like a rumor as didn't want to embarrass itself. By week 3, Whitman's name disappeared from internal memos. By week 5, I heard he'd been reassigned. Corporate language for exile. None of it brought me joy, just equilibrium. Late one evening, I got an email from Sarah, forwarded from an internal chain. If anyone still has documentation from Ethan's process, please contact IT. I read it once, then deleted it. They didn't need the old system. They needed to learn what it cost to treat the people who built it like props. That night, I stood on my balcony, city lights blinking below like small truths refusing to stay hidden. I realized I hadn't thought about the party in days. The laughter, the humiliation. It all felt small now, like static before a clean signal. Whitman once said in a meeting that every system is replaceable. I almost believed him. He was right about one thing, though. Every system does have a failsafe. I was theirs, and I'd just been triggered. 3 months later, I was sitting in an office with real sunlight. Not the tinted corporate kind that filters everything into gray ambition, but the honest light that makes dust visible. My name was on the door, operations director, different company, different energy, same craft. People greeted each other by name here. The CEO didn't need to be the loudest in the room to prove he existed. I came in early, stayed just long enough, and went home with my head still quiet. That's how I knew I'd healed. Sometimes healing doesn't look like smiling. It looks like not flinching when you hear laughter in a meeting. The first week after I started, my new team asked if I wanted to rebuild the client workflow system from scratch. I said, no, I want to build it right. We did. Together. No egos, no scapegoats, no open mic humiliation disguised as humor. Just good work. On the 3rd Friday of that first month, I got a message from Sarah. No emojis, no build-up. They fired Whitman. I stared at the text for a long time. Not out of surprise. That part had been inevitable, but because of how quiet it felt inside me when I read it. Reason, I asked. Board lost confidence. Client pulled out after system failures. HR escorted him out. She added after a pause. He tried to blame you again. I typed. He already did once. Didn't work then either. Then deleted it. Instead, I just replied, thanks for letting me know. You doing okay? Better. Office feels different without him. I put my phone face down and exhaled through a smile that never reached my lips. That was enough. A few weeks later, our company landed a new client, a big one. I read the name on the contract and froze. It was Whitman's old account, the one he used to brag about. They'd come to us quietly, asking if I could help rebuild what had fallen apart. I didn't gloat. I didn't even mention it in the meeting. I just nodded and said, we'll take care of you. That night, I stayed late, not out of pressure, out of choice. I adjusted some code, wrote a cleaner script, and looked around the office. No noise, no laughter that cuts, just keyboards and low conversation. Peace isn't silence. It's the absence of needing to explain yourself. One evening, I left early and stopped by the same bar where Whitman used to hold his team celebrations. The bartender didn't recognize me. I ordered a drink, sat in the same corner where I'd once listened to his stories about how people just need thicker skin. The TV behind the bar played some local business segment. I wasn't really watching until I heard the name of my old company. The headline said, Leadership Shakeup Continues Amid Major Client Losses. They showed a photo of Whitman, not the charming grin from his profile, but a still from a candid shot, eyes unfocused, face gray. The reporter said he'd stepped down to pursue new opportunities. I knew that tone. Corporate code for burn bridges and exit paperwork, signed in silence. I raised my glass once, not as a toast, as closure. Then I left half the drink on the table and walked out into air that didn't feel borrowed anymore. The next morning I got to work before anyone else. I brewed the first pot of coffee, opened the blinds, and looked out at the skyline. Somewhere across that same city, Whitman was probably telling someone new how he'd been sabotaged by a bitter employee. People like him need to keep the story alive. It's how they survive themselves. Me? I didn't need a story. I had work. By noon, my new team was laughing about something. A client misprint, a spreadsheet gone rogue, the kind of laughter that doesn't have victims. I smiled this time. When the meeting ended, our CEO walked past my desk and said, "By the way, great work on that client transition. They said you handled it with class." I just nodded. Later, as I packed up to leave, I passed the conference room mirror and caught my reflection. For the first time in a long time, I didn't look like someone surviving a job. I looked like someone living one. Outside, the sky was clear. No noise, no ghosts. Just the soft hum of traffic, the smell of rain that hadn't started yet, the sense of something right. I thought about that night at the party. The jokes, the laughter, the look in Whitman's eyes when he thought power meant permission. And then, for the first time, I let it fade completely. People say revenge is loud, shouting, slam doors, public victories. But they're wrong. Sometimes revenge is quiet. It's the sound of a chair left empty in a room that used to belong to someone who thought you'd never leave. And sometimes it's peace, real peace, that does the talking. He taught me one thing that night. Sometimes silence is the loudest resignation letter.